Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. My name is Sandy Houston. I'm the president of the Newsletter Editors Association, and I'm the newsletter editor for the class of 1990. And did somebody else just join the call?
Yes, David Van Lee.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, David. So we are excited to be able to offer this workshop to you all today. We have about an hour, and our goal here is really to, we really think that the role of newsletter editor is the best and most fun class officer role. So our goal is to make it as easy as possible, find ways to support editors in what they do, and particularly to support those editors that are new to their role and are picking up a newsletter after some time off and are trying to figure out what the best way is to kind of kickstart this effort. And so this is a bit of a kind of newsletter workshop 101, how to get things started. We'll cover how to collect information from your classmates, looking at some of the key features that are great to include in your newsletters. We'll cover a little bit on how to design your newsletter, how to make it look pretty, and then how to work with the Dartmouth team to get it ready for publishing, and what resources you have on hand to help make your newsletters great. And then we'll open it up for questions at the end. So we will run through our agenda. If you could hold your questions until the end, that would be helpful, because we know we have a number of you on the call. And then just a reminder again that we are recording this call so that other editors can be able to access it afterwards if they weren't able to join today. And then it doesn't sound like we've got any extraneous noises on the call. Did someone just join?
Yes, this is Bob Cohn.
Hi, Bob. How are you? Sandy Houston.
Good.
Nice to have you here. So we're just kicking things off. And just talking about how this is kind of a 101 rundown of how to kick off your newsletter. So we are recording the call, and then I was just going to say that if you have noises on your end, if you could mute your phone while we're talking, that sometimes can be helpful. Sometimes you don't know what noises get picked up on conference calls. So if we could, as a first step, just kind of do it around the room here and give your name and your class year, and then we'll introduce ourselves as well.
Sandy?
Yeah.
Can I suggest, since we all can't see who's in the room, could you call out the names of who's on, and they can chime in with their year?
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay, I will do that. So I've got Jim Burns.
Yeah, class of 76.
Excellent. Okay, Bob Cohn.
66.
Excellent. Bill Goodspeed.
1980.
Excellent. Okay, and Lindsay?
97.
Awesome. Jim Rooks.
We call it the great class of 1967.
And Michelle is on.
99.
Awesome. And Mark Waterhouse.
68.
Great. And David.
David
Okay.
Van Lee, 79.
Great. Okay. Did I miss anyone?
Kate Gold?
Yep, I'm here. Kate, 98. Still rhymes. It's very convenient. And I'm the VP of the association.
Great. And Angela and Laurel, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Angela Stafford, 91, within the class activities team in Hanover. And Laurel Appleton, class activities coordinator.
Awesome. Great. Okay. So I'll kick in here to our agenda, and where we're going to start is how do you even get content to put in a class newsletter? And we have a few ideas from this front on how to start your content collection. One of the best ways to start is with your class officer team. So this is kind of your built-in committee on how to get content from classmates and how to get content on what's happening with Dartmouth and with your class activities. So we encourage you to work with your class officer group to put information in your newsletter about what's happening with the goals with your class, highlighting your class projects, highlighting giving initiatives with the Dartmouth College Fund, and in particular, we think the reunion chairs are really important connections for newsletter editors. We have found that newsletters can be incredible communications tools and engagement tools leading up to reunions, and we had a lot of great record-setting reunions this past year with great newsletters that highlighted, the events that were happening, called out, registration deadlines, and so that's a really important connection to have as an editor. And then another great connection is with your class secretary. So your class secretary is also in the business of collecting classmate news, but they have a word limit, and so if you find that your secretaries are receiving information that exceeds their word limit, the newsletter is a great place to publish that news and to dive deeper into some of those stories that come through to your class secretaries where they might be good fodder for profiles of classmates where you have more room to do that in your newsletter. So class officers, great place to start for content. Another way to collect content is to build a kind of an informal committee of your classmates that represents sort of a cross-section of your class so that they can help you collect news and you're not doing it all yourself. That's been effective for folks. You can also directly email your classmates requesting news. And a lot of newsletter editors do this. We have an email system called iModules, and our team at Dartmouth can help you figure out how to use that. It's a great tool because it taps directly into your class database. And what we find is that often when you ask for news from your classmates, a lot of people think, well, I'm not really doing anything newsworthy. I don't really see what I would contribute. So a lot of editors ask certain questions, leading questions that get people to contribute, and then also use different themes or different topics to solicit news from classmates. So it's just one example. I've done some themed newsletters, and one was on travel. And so I asked my classmates if they had any memories of their FSP programs while they were at Dartmouth that they would want to share, and if they had any stories of recent travels that they have done with their families or anything they wanted to share, and always soliciting photos along with that. So asking specific questions and topical questions is a great way to generate news from classmates, even those that don't really think they've got anything to contribute. We also have take-a-minute cards, green cards, and some editors include those. You can have them included in your print newsletters when you mail those out. So it's a postcard that classmates can fill out and send back to you. Some editors also have versions of this on their class websites that have been effective ways for people to submit news. And then the last thing I would say, and if we have time, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but to really have some fun with it. We have a lot of editors that do surveys of their classmates and publish the results in their newsletters. We have classmates that do highlight little kind of paper virtual reunions of different groups on from their class that they like people that lived in the lodge, and then they'll feature updates from all folks that lived in the lodge, and that's been very effective. Tapping into nostalgia, there are all kinds of fun things that our editors do to engage classmates and solicit content. So that is a little intro on how to collect content. And I will turn it over to Kate, who's going to talk about some of the features that help make newsletters effective for classmates. Kate, you're up.
Yep, thanks. And I would also say, like, if you want some ideas of how these can be done, definitely check out the PowerPoint from the presentation from Cal that is available on the website. So a lot of classes, to make it recognizable and have a kind of repeating element, will have a banner kind of at the top of their cover page if they like to jump right into content. Some people do a full-on cover. I like to cover my cover with pictures for visual, but some people do a shorter newsletter, so like to use that for content, and a banner can do the same kind of thing. Updates from your class president are key. I think, I don't know if mini readings was specifically mentioned already because I'm a little spacey today, but the mini reunions, you get kind of double bang for those, because first you get to talk about what's coming up for mini reunions, and then you get to report out about it in the next issue. So I always like things that can give me 2 pages in 2 separate newsletters. Plus, they sometimes come with pictures, which is always nice. Mm-hmm. So the mini reunions, the reunions, you know, if you happen to be completely insane and you're your reunion chair and a newsletter editor, then it's really easy to get that information. But we we just had a reunion year, and we really focused on making sure that everybody had enough information to decide to come to reunion, and a lot of people did, so that was really useful. We also feature our class project in every issue, like what's going on with it. We can get updates from the college often if it's a specific person. I've seen other classes who sponsor, like the Dickey internships and other things, have features from the students who benefit from that, which is nice. People like to kind of see where their money is going and connect it to a real person, which is always fun. And, you know, get to brag about your class giving, and especially if you're, you know, in a cluster reunion year, you get to see where you are in relation to the other classes, and sometimes that gets people fired up enough to get a little competitive there. Plus, it gives you nice visuals like charts and graphs and things, which I always like to include too. The Alumni Council, our Alumni Counselor has been fantastic about writing up a report for the class about everything that's going on and what happened there at those meetings. So that usually is a nice check-in to some of the broader events through the eyes of one of our classmates, which is nice. Obits, we have not had very many obituaries in our class, fortunately, but I know that there are some wonderful examples of how to report on the passing of a classmate in other classes' issues, and I think we highlighted a few of them, but I would recommend kind of checking out what we have on the website for examples of that. And then I always like to do a photo gallery, so I always solicit pictures. Sometimes I can take them straight off Facebook because people will post them to Facebook first, and I figure if they're sharing them with the class online, then they're fair game for sharing in the newsletter, and nobody has complained yet. So the only problem with downloading off of Facebook, especially, is sometimes they're not very high resolution photos. So if one is, it's a great photo and I really want to include it, but it's not quite good enough for the print, sometimes I'll contact the person and ask them if they have a better version of the picture, and very often they do, and we're happy to share it. I really haven't had anybody say no to that. So, I mean, those are kind of the key elements for us. We always include, like, you know, kind of save the dates for upcoming events, and I would say the other thing that I didn't mention that's kind of on our agenda here is the class officers list. So we like to make sure that everybody has a contact listed, and we include our executive committee, our broader executive committee in that as well. And I think having that contact information helps because people who may not know the exec board folks may know somebody else who's on the broader committee at large. And it's always easier to email somebody you know. And we've gotten people who've expressed interest in various things contacting through that because we do have those email listings in the newsletter, which we also post online, so on our class page. So just another way to get kind of like people to write in who might not have been involved otherwise.
Great. Thanks, Kate. And just another reminder for folks that we do have examples of each of these sort of features in the deck from Class Officers Weekend this past September. So those are just some examples. A lot of newsletter editors are incorporating these really effectively, and it is one of the things that we look for when we think about the newsletter editor of the year is including some of these features regularly. So it's a great way to keep classmates informed about what's going on with the class, in addition to what each other are doing. So you've got some of these features, and you've got some content. So the next step is, how do you make it look nice? How do you design a newsletter? How do you make it look pretty? And Angela and Laurel are going to talk a little bit about this. I'll just give my 2 cents that folks get gripped at times by the technology of design, and I would just encourage editors to not worry as much about that. Certainly we have editors that do an incredible job, and we have editors that do their newsletters in Word. I'm going to experiment this year ahead with a handwritten newsletter. I know Angela and Laurel are gasping in horror. But I think that there are a lot of different ways to go about it, and I think it's about making it as easy as possible for yourself to put something out that is engaging for classmates to read. So I'll turn it over to Angela and Laurel.
I can't wait to see your handwritten newsletters. But to piggyback on what Sandy said, we see newsletter editors using all different kinds of tools. Many use Adobe InDesign, many use Word, some are using Publisher, some used Pages in the past, so it really depends on what your comfort level is. We at the college have an agreement through the computing store here, we can get you a license for Adobe InDesign at a discounted rate. The challenge, however, is we can't provide support for it, so that's sort of the double-edged sword of that. But if that is something that you're interested in or are familiar with, we can assign that license, and your class president would authorize the class paying for it. Another way that we can help is we typically have a newsletter intern in our office. I'm trying to hire currently. I don't have one now, and that is the challenge that we do see, is finding a student to fill that role. But when we have had the intern, they work with newsletter editors to help with design and layout and photo optimization and that kind of thing. And I should also mention that the 2 printers that we work with, DPMS, Dartmouth Print and Mail, and RC Brayshaw, both offer design and layout services for a fee. So if you find yourself in a bind, or if you've inherited a newsletter from somebody else and you're not quite trained in the software yet, those 2 printers will be happy to be contracted to help with your layout. So those are, and we would just encourage you to, if you're new, start with us, and we can talk about what your class has done in the past, or we can give you some paths to mentors. I know both Sandy and Kate have lots of experience, and we know of other editors within the association who have offered to be mentors or to take questions because they are subject matter experts with different tools. So we can always connect you to somebody who would be happy to email with you or speak with you and give you their thoughts. Do you want to talk? Laurel's going to talk about some other making it pretty tips.
So some other making it pretty tips that come up pretty regularly when I do talk with newsletter editors is photo quality. And of course, what may look good on a cell phone may not look good when it's laid out for print. And so photos do vary in quality, and making sure that you are submitting high quality photos, or if you're not, realizing that it's not going to look so great in print when you do print it. So this is something that has come up fairly regularly. As I said, we did talk about it at Class Officers Weekend, and we're hoping at some point to be able to put together some kind of instructions for how do you determine what is a good quality image, what specs do you need, as well as ways that you can solicit from your classmates good quality photos. So that's definitely one thing, making it look pretty is using good quality photos. And another thing is proofing and proofing and proofing again. We highly encourage that you have several of your classmates look over your newsletters before you ever send them to us. And that is because by the time that you do send it to us and we get the ball rolling with the printer, if you're having to do multiple rounds of reproofs with our office and the printer, that can really slow down the process of printing, and it can also incur charges, especially if you're doing multiple rounds of reproofs with R.C. Brayshaw, who lays things out on a plate. And so it's very costly once it has been plated to reproof. So we highly encourage that you proof and proof and proof again before sending it to us.
It's great if you can find someone in your class that sort of has that, eagle eye. I know our treasurer is just incredible in picking out those details, even though I've read it over and over and over. And I never send a newsletter to Dartmouth until he's had a chance to look at it. So it's a really important step.
Yeah, I would also say there's a class, I can't remember if it's 87 or a different class, who has a specific reviewer for specific things. So she has someone who only reviews the spelling of names, and someone who only reviews the dates around upcoming events. And so they have a team of 3 or 4 people who are specifically looking at one thing and one thing only, and that works really well for that class.
So in general, something that I've said constantly to my students when I was teaching at a university is that just because you've reproofed it several times doesn't mean that it's perfect. Just because you get so familiar with how you're writing that you become blind to some of the things that other people would pick up. So I definitely recommend having somebody else look at it.
And a note, we've alluded to you sending it to Dartmouth, and we'll get to that at the end in a moment about our role in that process. But I do read through your newsletter. Mostly I'm looking at particularly reunion classes and reunion dates and making sure that there isn't anything communicated that's in error. And so we occasionally will find a typo, and we'll alert you to that if we do. But certainly we're not an expert set of proofreading eyes.
So we're going to turn now to talking about how to get it ready for publishing. So at this point, after you've proofed and proofed again, we recommend as a best practice that you reach out and notify our office first. If you have in the past directly contacted the printers prior to talking with us, that can actually slow down the process of getting things ready, because the printers are handling so many other print requests, and while they put it in a queue, it may not be sent over to us right away, and so it might take a few days before they send it to us. And during that time, Angela could have been reviewing it. I could have been pulling the list of classmates that it's going to be sent to. I could have been preparing all of the specifications. So you kind of lose a lot of days when you first go straight to the print house rather than going to us and then us facilitating that. So we recommend that you start with Angela and I first. From there, if you have a relationship with one of the printers before, then we would work with that printer. If you need help choosing what printer to use, we can certainly talk about that, and we can give you quotes from the printers if that's something that you're interested in. Please do note that if at that time you're contacting us and you're under a deadline and you're requesting a quote then, that might not be the best time to request a quote because quotes can take several days, if not longer, and that could really slow down your printing process. So we recommend that if you do ask for a quote, that you do it far in advance of sending the newsletter to us so it doesn't slow down that process. So once you've selected all your variables, as far as time frames and turnaround time, certainly Dartmouth Printing and Services does move faster than R.C. Brayshaw, and that's just because R.C. Brayshaw is a very high volume printing print house, sorry. So that's something that you do want to keep in mind. Turnaround time for us, that's going to depend upon, everything that's going on in our office as well. Print and mail time. For printing, that depends upon the printer, how quickly and what's going on with the printers. And as far as mailing, if you do first class, it could hit, once it's been printed and mailed, it could hit within several business days to your classmates. If you go with nonprofit, then that could be anywhere from 7 to 14 days, sometimes longer, depending upon that. And of course, if you send international, that's going to take much longer to get to those classmates. And there are certainly benefits to sending first class, and that in particular is because you can get, if there's a return of something, that can be returned to alumni records for us, and that way we can update contact information. It can also be forwarded to people if they have a forwarding address. So those are definitely some benefits of using first class, but it is very, it's much more costly than doing nonprofit. And at Class Officers Weekend, we also talked about some blackout dates for our office. If Angela would like to talk a little bit more about that, and then she's going to talk a little bit about invoicing as well.
Sure. We've introduced the idea of blackout dates within the last year, and blackout is sort of a misnomer. It's not that we're telling you that you can't send us your newsletter during certain times of the year, but what we're saying is during these specific dates, and they are on the website, and we'll send a recap email after this call, but during those times of the year, particularly right around reunion, around Class Officers Weekend, definitely during the college's winter break closure in December, that if you do send us your newsletter, we will take longer than normal to process, and they'll go into a queue. So I'm happy to talk individually with folks about the dates. Again, we've publicized them, and I can point you to those. It's just something that we're asking editors to just plan ahead and be aware of, because we do know that your deadlines are really important to you. I just wanted to also make a note around printing, that we know that most of you are posting your newsletters to your websites, emailing them through iModules, or putting them on your Facebook page. Both of our printers prepare web-ready PDFs, pretty much standard as part of the print process, so you will always be able to get that. It won't have printer marks or anything on it. If that's something that you need the printer to do for you, we can do that. In terms of invoicing, Laurel talked about quotes. We're really happy to prepare those for you, or to work with a printer to prepare those for you. They can be complicated, so they do take some time. And then Dartmouth, recognizing how important a class newsletter is to keeping classmates engaged, we subsidize your print costs, $400 3 times a year, a 4th time if you're a reunion class. So that just gets applied to your invoice, to the cost of printing, not postage. That's something we handle on our side through your class, through the invoice to your class treasury. I think Laurel had something to add.
Yeah, so to kind of wrap up the section talking about how to get ready for publishing, so basically that process starts with you contacting us, and then we get everything ready on our end and communicate with the printers. We'll then get a proof, and we'll share that with you for you to do one last set of, okay, these are the specifications I want, this looks okay, and from there we then approve it with the printer, and we get from printing then to mail, and at that point if you would like a web-ready PDF, we can also get that for you.
And I should note we track all of these.
Cutting in because I have to go, so good luck
Thank
with the
you.
rest. Take care.
Thank
If anybody has questions, feel free to email me. Bye-bye.
We do track all of these points in time for your newsletter, so we keep track of when it's received in our office, when we've sent it to the printer, when a proof is received, how many revisions were made during the process. So we do have lots of statistics, and we could share with you if you're new or you're inheriting this newsletter. We can tell you sort of generally how long it takes for your newsletter to go from point of submission to point of being mailed. So we're happy to share those stats with you if you're curious.
That's great. Thank you both. And the next section here, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the resources that are available to help you as you create your newsletters. So there is a class newsletter editor's web page within the Dartmouth website. It's the volunteer section of the Dartmouth website. There's a lot of great information there that I really encourage you to browse through. There is a handbook that goes through a lot of the information that we've shared today. It's a really great primer on creating great newsletters. And we also have sample newsletters so that you can look through various classes, recent newsletters that have been created, and get some ideas and inspiration for your own newsletters. We also have a newsletter editor's Facebook page. If you are not already a member and you are a Facebooker, we encourage you to sign up for that. We do post updates, suggestions, tips. We'll be posting notifications on future workshops. I noticed that Angela posted today the fact that the 250th website just went live. So it's a great place to connect with other editors, ask questions, and get some tips for your newsletters. We share probably quarterly. We send out a bulletin from the association. We try and highlight different newsletters, talk about some of the things coming up, and there's information there, so we encourage you to read those. We encourage you to come to Class Officers Weekend every September. It's a great way to connect with other editors, and a lot of ideas get shared at that weekend. And then the Class Activities Report is another resource that we wanted to call out. That does get filled out every year by class officers, and we have great information there about best practices that editors are using, and so we encourage you to share things within your class activities report section that have worked for you, and that will help other editors as well. And then a lot of editors use our resources at the Rauner Library. Am I saying that right, Angela?
I say Rauner, but it's
Rauner. But there are some incredible archival materials there that, and I haven't visited myself, but a lot of editors have found great success using those resources, so we wanted to point them out too. Any, Angela and Laurel, that I'm missing?
Well, I did want to, Rauner has photo files online. if you Google Rauner photo files, they have many, many, many photos that are downloadable. They will say something like permission required for use, but I've spoken with Rauner, and if you are an editor who is using the photo in your newsletter to further Dartmouth, then you don't have to individually request permission per photo. There are just some amazing resources there. You know, what was your snow sculpture during your year of Winter Carnival? Those are all on there, and sports teams, and it's just a real good supply of photos, and I encourage everybody to go there. And also the Dartmouth College Flickr account, Dartmouth alumni Flickr accounts. Again, those photos are in the public space, in the public domain, so you are welcome to download from there and use as you want.
And then, Angela, can you also talk about the style guide and where that lives?
Sure. We're talking about the visual identity, Sandy?
Yes. Yes.
So Dartmouth, as many of you know, released an updated visual identity system late last year, and that includes the new word mark, the new brand mark, the new deep Hein, and also some fonts and color palette. And so I'm actually going to post on our webpage the portal and how editors can access these mostly the word marks and the brand marks, so you can download them. We've shared that out in the past, but I think I need to put it right on the website, so I will do that after this call. And so those are, again, you're able to use those and incorporate those. There are some restrictions about how they can't be modified and sort of the amount of white space around things like the deep Hein and those things, but all of that is within what we're calling the volunteer portal. So I'll include that information as well.
That's great. And then just one last reminder on resources, which is that this team, Sandy, Kate, Angela, Laurel, we are all your resources as well. And so I encourage you, if you do have questions, to reach out to any one of us, either directly or on our Facebook page, and we'd be happy to answer questions or point you in the right direction. And so our next section here, we're getting towards the point where we want to open it up for questions. I wanted to anticipate a few questions that might come up and answer them in advance. But one question we get is, well, how many newsletters should I do each year? And we recommend that you think about doing 3 or more newsletters each year to get a rhythm going for your class and engaging your classmates. But it's really up to your class and your class's goals and your class's budgets. And some classes do 1 print newsletter and a couple of electronic newsletters, depending on how your classmates like to receive information. Some newsletter editors have surveyed their classmates on how they'd like to receive newsletters and have chosen print or electronic from there. So again, we like to see 3 or more, but that's really a recommendation. It's not mandatory. Other editors ask, well, how many pages should my newsletter be? Again, we find that 8 pages is a nice place to start. There are some editors that do many, many more pages for their newsletters. If you are going through the process of creating a newsletter, it's nice to have 8 or more pages. And obviously, it's in even numbers because of the back and forth pages. Am I saying that right? But you want to have even numbers for printing purposes at least. PDFs, you have more flexibility. And then we often get the question, we talked about printed versus electronic newsletters, and that really varies by class. And then we get the question about how much does it cost to do a newsletter. And Laurel talked a little bit about this, with all of the variables of, color versus black and white, first class versus bulk. It's hard to really estimate how much a newsletter costs. We would like to, as an association, provide some guidelines on estimates, but it's really about working on your particular newsletter to get that quote, and that will give you, a sense for future newsletters once you've got your newsletter started. Angela and Laurel, anything else you want to say about cost?
In general, I would just say, as a reminder, it is an estimate, and you might see that the estimate that they quote you may, on occasion, be on the high side because they're estimating what could happen, and then especially with the postage, because once DPMS runs things through their machine, at that time they can look for savings, and that can save you on postage. So sometimes they tend to estimate on the high end for postage, and then over a certain number of pieces can save on things. So that's just something to keep in mind. It is an estimate. It is not an exact quote. And in general can be quite difficult to really estimate like how much of a cost difference it is between, say, a 16 and a 17 page, or a 17 and an 18 page, because when you reach out to the printers, they're just going to tell you it is going to creep up incrementally is usually the response that I get from the printers. So they can't really nail down exactly the difference between a 16 and a 17 page, a 17 and an 18. I can try to push on that, but in general, the print houses, they don't go that granular between those number of pages because it is a small cost difference. It's not a giant difference like you would see between a first class versus a nonprofit, or using an envelope versus a self-mailer. Those are your bigger things, or doing offset printing versus digital printing. Those are going to be your big cost differences.
And I would say generally, if not uniformly, both printers, if they know that cost is a concern or a priority, they will help you and us work to find efficiencies and savings. So if that is something, I think all classes should be being fiscally responsible with their treasury. But if there are times when it's particularly important that some savings be realized, knowing that, and we can have that conversation with the printer. And DPMS in particular is really good at looking for ways to cut costs.
Great. So that is for the 45-minute rundown of how to create a newsletter, and at this point we wanted to open it up to the group for questions and comments.
This is really, really helpful.
Awesome. Thanks.
This is Mark Waterhouse. We're thinking about allowing classmates to self-select electronic receipt rather than mail receipt. Who's responsible for doing the emailing of the electronic copies?
So, Mark, that would be someone in your class
okay.
who has been trained. If you're going to use iModules, and I suggest you do, it would be the person in your class who's been trained on the iModules email module.
Okay. I know exactly who that is.
Okay. That's great that you have someone, and I know that at Class Officers Weekend, typically the Friday before the agenda really kicks in, there are iModules trainings that are helpful. They're sort of like a walk-in training for folks that want to get up to speed on that as well.
Yep, and the Alumni Help Desk will do, as soon as you're ready, as soon as your class has identified somebody, they'll schedule that one-on-one training over the phone, and it works fairly well. I would say iModules is something that if you only use it once or twice a year, it can be hard to remember how it works. So that's why we recommend that each class have an iModules communicator who's doing all of the emails for the class. I should also say, if you want to, as Laurel sort of alluded to, if you want to invite your classmates to opt out of a paper newsletter, then you can collect their names, send it up to us, and that's a flag that we put on their record in our database. So, for example, the class of 62 has over 200 classmates who've said, I want to save the class money, I want to save trees, please don't send me a paper newsletter. So when we pull their newsletter list out of the database, it excludes those classmates. And so they're going to receive it in email or off of the class website, but they're not going to get a paper copy. So if that's of interest, we can sort of walk you through the process of getting that started.
That's great. Other questions, comments?
This is David Van Lee, 79. Just one quick rule of thumb for people on photos. File size is a good signal. There's a lot of technical stuff in photos. Usually at printers like 300 dots per inch for printing. Newsletters online, 150 can be pretty good. But if somebody's sending you a file, if it's less than 250 kilobytes, probably not going to reprint. So I've had at 250 to 500 kilobytes sometimes a pretty good photo. But generally, what I tell people is if your file size is smaller than a megabyte, I probably don't want your photo. And at least for a print newsletter. And in exceptions, you can go down to 500 kilobytes. But if somebody's sending you a 74 kilobyte file, it's not going to be any good.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
This is Bill Goodspeed from 80. The website that you referred to, could you send us the link to it or let us know what it is? You probably already have, but I don't know.
We will send out a recap after this meeting with that information.
Okay. Thank you.
A recap would be very handy. I take notes, but sometimes I miss things, and recapping the websites and the names and the stuff like that would be wonderful.
Yep, great. We'll do that. Thanks.
Hi, this is Lindsay Necker, 97. I was wondering if you could go through the production timeline again. So we have a newsletter in the editing phases, pretty much done. How soon before done should we be requesting a quote? And then can you walk through just the process of how it filters through your office to the printer and how long that takes and kind of what the order is?
Right. So Laurel here. So we would recommend that you request a quote well in advance because it's going to take, I would say, at least 2 weeks just because I've found that when you request a quote, we go to the printer, I then send you the quote back, you tend to have more questions after that quote. And so we might go through a couple of rounds of going back and forth on things. So that is helpful. And then as far as the process, when you contact me at that point, it might take, a couple days in our non-busy times for Angela and I to be able to review it and then pull the specs together, confirm them with you. We might have to go back and forth a little bit about that, confirming things, especially if you're a new newsletter editor and you're doing things differently than the former one. So that might take a few days there, and then pulling the list. So it might be in our office for a couple of days, doing all those things, communicating with you, and then it goes to the printer from there, depending upon their load and what's going on at the print house. It might be with them for a few days. And then they'll send us back a proof, and depending upon how quickly you can review that proof, especially if you're having other people review it too, that can slow down the process. But we do recommend that you still do that, have somebody review and approve that. And then once it prints, it can print pretty quickly with DPMS. It might take a little bit longer to print with RC Brayshaw just because they have to plate it. And then they are, again, a larger print house, so they have more going on. And then with RC Brayshaw, there is the factor of once it is printed, they have to courier over it to DPMS in order for it to get mailed out. While if you went with DPMS, they do everything from receiving to proofing to the printing and the mailing. So there is that factors. As far as, time frames, our She Brayshaw might take up to 14 days once everything has, and as long as you also don't have multiple rounds of corrections, because that can make things go longer. DPMS, I've found that between the couple of days in our office and then working with DPMS, you might be able to get it out into a week, maybe a little bit longer than a week. And then, of course, yeah.
And then there are the times when it will take 3 days because it's quiet. And then you'll think, oh, it only takes 3 days. We try to move as quickly as we can.
We do.
So I don't want anybody to think that we're not placing a priority on your newsletter. We appreciate that often there is timely information in your newsletter. There are mini reunion dates or homecoming dates or reunion dates that you are announcing so that your piece needs to hit mailboxes at certain points. Again, we go back to, work with us. Let us know. Let us know it's coming. If you want to tell us your whole schedule for the year of when you're planning your newsletters, we would love to know that. We would put you right on our docket.
It's coming.
Send us an email and tell us when you expect it to hit our desks, and then we can tell you, hey, guess what? We're out of the office that day. We have a conference, or we can at least work with you to make sure that we're moving it as quickly as we can. And I would also say that the printers like to know it's coming too, because then they can DPMS it's the board, and so as soon as we know yours is coming, we lob it over and we say it's coming. They put you on the board, so then you're in their schedule. So the more that you can plan ahead and have your dates communicated to us, the better.
Good to know. Thank you. And one follow-up on the cost. You mentioned that the college offsets $400 of the newsletter part, not the postage part. Can you give a ballpark on how many black and white pages and how many color pages $400 covers?
Honestly, no. What I can do, Lindsay, though, is we can pull your invoices from the past and show you what percentage was covered. It really depends on which printer you use and the total cost. Most classes in the 90s and younger use up the whole subsidy. Older classes that aren't printing as many only use a portion of the subsidy.
I mean, we haven't done a newsletter in over 5 years, so I don't know how useful it's going to be to look at what we've done in the past. But
well, maybe I can maybe look at one of your shoulder classes and give you an estimate that way. We could look at a class that's next to you guys who's doing something, and I can share what they incur in terms of charges.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think what you're hearing is that there are just so many variables. But that's nice, because if you're a class that is looking to cut costs, there are ways to still, be effective as an editor and have a great newsletter, but do it on a lower cost scale.
I understand, yeah, but if you're talking to your treasurer about how much money you're going to spend and you have no idea how much money you're going to spend, it's not a very helpful budgeting conversation.
Yeah, hear you for sure.
That is why we are able to give you an estimate, but it's when you get down to the really granular level that it is, again, just an estimate. So,
but I think Laurel and I know that we need to put together some, here's a 12-page color newsletter sent to 1,000 people. Here's what it costs, and here's, we do want to put that together and get that out there as soon as we can, because everybody's asking for this. So.
And we are very cognizant of how classes want to save money. So, we're very happy to put a quote together for you, and we are working on putting something together that can really show kind of those variables. But again, the biggest cost differences are going to be those postage rates. It's going to be whether or not you use an envelope or a self-mailer. It's going to be giant jumps in page numbers, so going from 12 to 30. Those are going to be your big cost differential.
A giant jump in a page number? What do you mean?
So if you go from having a 12-page newsletter usually, and then you hit reunion year and you decide to do a 24-page newsletter, that's going to be, I don't know if it's double. I don't want to say that it's necessarily double, but it's probably going to be close.
Okay.
Hey, Lindsay, I just came off a stint as treasurer, so I will give Ben some copies of paperwork from our recent newsletters to share with you.
Fantastic.
That's great. Nice.
Yeah.
So we have just a couple more minutes. Any last questions or comments?
I'm going to have to run. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you joining. Anybody else? Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining. We hope the information was helpful. Don't hesitate to reach out to any of us with questions or comments, and we do hope to do this on a regular basis, and we'll explore other topics as well, but encourage you to follow us on Facebook and reach out with questions, and thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
And have fun.